Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the FPCJ press briefing today. The 10th regular session of the Northern Committee of the Western Central Pacific Fisheries Commission was held last week in Fukuoka. It adopted a recommendation of a conservation and management measure for the management of Pacific bluefin tuna based on a Japanese proposal to reduce catches of juvenile Pacific bluefin tuna by 50%. Today, we have invited Mr. Hisashi Endo, the Chief Counsellor of Fisheries Agency, from your right, and Mr. Masanori Miyahara, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries Advisor, to talk about Japanese initiatives and leadership in tuna resource management. Today's briefing is in English only. Before listening to what Mr. Endo and Mr. Miyahara have to say, I would like to ask you to turn your cell phones to the silent mode, please. Then, Mr. Endo, please.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction. My name is Endo of Fisheries Agency of Japan. And I think we have distributed a press release issued on September 4th. Unfortunately, it is written in just for Japanese, so I would like to explain the contents of that press release in English. But before proceeding that, I would like to, it's better to explain what Pacific bluefin tuna is, where they're born, and how they migrate, or something like that. So I'd like just to explain. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture, but figures. But please imagine the Pacific Ocean, especially North Pacific Ocean. There are surrounding countries from Mexico, from east side, Mexico and the U.S. and Canada, and again Alaska, U.S. and Russia and Japan, and the Korea, and of course also we had Chinese Taipei there, and we had the spawning area of the Pacific bluefin tuna is around Japan, located in around Japan, mainly south part of Japan or eastern part of Taiwan. And also there's a small spawning area in Japan Sea also. And they, after hatched, they stayed there, but in 2 or 3, after growing to the 2 or 3 years old, they migrate to the eastern side of US or Mexico. There, they stayed for a while and returned to western side and spawn. That outline, just outline of the how they live, how the Pacific bluefin tuna live in the Pacific Ocean. And there are 2 fisheries management bodies in the Pacific Ocean. One is Western and Central Pacific Fisheries Commission. Northern Committee is a subsidiary subcommittee of that commission, and I'm going to talk about that later. And eastern side, Eastern Pacific side, there's the Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission, which also covers management and conservation and management of the Pacific bluefin tuna. So both organizations should have to cooperate to realize the conservation and management of that Pacific bluefin tuna. I'm going to talk about Northern Committee of the Pacific Bluefin Tuna, Northern Committee of the Western Central Fisheries Pacific Fisheries Commission, which is called WCPFC. So WCPFC Northern Committee was held in Fukuoka, Japan on last week from 1st to 4th September. And the 7 Northern Committee CCM. CCM means members, cooperating non-members, and also participating territories. It's complicated, but all the members which is involved in this organization. So 7 members and 8 observers participated in that meeting, and more than 120 participants attended at the meeting. Of course, most of all were Japanese delegation. And there was a task we have to do with regard to Pacific Bluefin Tuna in that Northern Committee. One is mentioned in the paragraph 9 in the CCM 2013-09. CCM means conservation and management measures. So it's an abbreviation of conservation and management measures. CCM 2013-09. It says that the Northern Committee at its regular session in 2014 shall review this CCM, means this adopted, that the CCM adopted last year, based on the stock status and the conservation advice for Pacific Bluefin Tuna, provided by ISC 14 in 2014, and take further action, including substantial catch reduction of juvenile fish, age 0 to 3, less than 30 kilogram. In this paragraph, we can see the ISC. It's an international scientific body, independent scientific body. It is International Scientific Committee for Tuna and the tuna-like species in the North Pacific Ocean. It's an official name, I think. We called it ISC, in short. And the next one is a work program for the Northern Committee of the WCPFC. It was adopted last year. It says that we should obtain and review an updated assessment and establish a rebuilding program with interim target and limit levels, as well as emergency measures in case of recruitment drop and as appropriate CDS. CDS is catch documentation scheme, which is not implemented, developed yet in this organization, but as appropriate, we have to think about catch documentation scheme in this organization also, and recommend a new conservation and management measures in accordance with the rebuilding program. So in short, we have to do is receive stock assessment and review from the ISC, review and maybe a management advice from the ISC, and establish a rebuilding program with some interim target or limit level. That was our task in that meeting. So next figure says the result of the ISC 14. This figure shows the spawning stock biomass. As you see, the current level of spawning stock biomass is very low, about 26,000 tons. And as you see, the historical lowest level was just before 20,000. So it's almost the lowest level. And we put the figure of historical median there, about 443,000 metric tons. Please remember that figure. It will appear later also. And this is recruitment. Recruitment is meant it's amount of juvenile fish which comes into the fisheries resources. So recruitment level changes a lot, very fluctuate. In the case of Pacific bluefin tuna, almost independent with the amount of stock biomass. But we received a report that says that recruitment level is in 2012 was estimated to be relatively low, 8th lowest in 61 years. And the average recruitment level for the last 5 years may have been below the historical average level. This figure shows that usually the low level or high level recruitment period continues in a certain period, certain years, maybe 10 years. 10 years or more or less 10 years. Next result is a future projection. It was a future projection under assumption that low recruitment will continue. Current low recruitment will continue 10 years in the future, then followed by average recruitment period. That would be an appropriate estimation and very conservative, but realistic one at the same time. So we show this, we indicate this figure here. And the result was very obvious. No scenario except for 50% reduction of juvenile catch demonstrate recovery to the historical median within 10 years. So that's a very obvious that only a 50% scenario can improve drastically the stock biomass. And this is a conservation advice from the ISC. And it said that in relation to the projection required by Northern Committee 9, last year's Northern Committee, only scenario 6, the strictest one, results in increase in SSB, spawning stock biomass, even if the current low recruitment continues. That's a point. And second point is, given the result of scenario 6, further substantial reduction in fishing mortality and juvenile catch over the whole range of juvenile ages should be considered to reduce the risk of SSB falling below its historical lowest level. Considering the result of ISC 14 report, we started to consider necessary rebuilding program and interim recovery targets. And we are going to talk about target issues. Target is recovery target. If we set a lower, it's it may be easier for fishermen, for us to control fishermen, but it's not enough. So we thought that appropriate provisional target should be like this. That is appropriate SSB level which can produce sufficient recruitment for stocks recovery. That's the target, appropriate SSB level, but which can produce sufficient recruitment for stock recovery. We thought that it should be a provisional target or interim target. And we analyzed with the help of a scientist what should be the target and what should be what is the minimum target or appropriate target. This is a figure of relationship between spawning stock biomass and recruitment. As you see, the spawning stock biomass almost no relationship with clear relationship with recruitment. Even SSB spawning stock biomass SSB is lower than historical median. Sometimes it produces enough recruitment for recovery. And we, based on this figure, we concluded that if SSB recovers to a historical median, sufficient recruitment have been ensured. So we set the SSB median, historically median, can be a yielding target. Considering these things altogether, then Japan proposed a draft conservation and management measures to establish a multi-annual rebuilding plan for Pacific bluefin tuna starting from next year through 2024, with a goal of achieving as a preliminary target level of historical median. That's a chart. It is called Kobe chart, but it's a chart showing the green level and the red level of or yellow levels of the stock status. Of course, green level is good status, good condition, and red part is not good, and white dot, it's a current. White dot. White dot. This is a current level. Our target is here. We have to. Our target is here. By adopting a conservation and management, appropriate conservation and management measures, we have to move this point to this point. That's our proposal. And also we have proposed a 50% reduction of juvenile catch, less than 30 kilogram, compared to the 2002, 2004 average. And this is points of adopted draft CCM on Pacific bluefin tuna. Paragraph 1 said, CCM shall implement a provisional multi-annual rebuilding plan for Pacific bluefin tuna starting in 2015 with the initial goal of rebuilding the SSB to the historical median within 10 years with at least 60% probability. And paragraph 3.1 said, total fishing effort by the vessel fishing for Pacific bluefin tuna in the area north of the 20 degrees, north shall stay below the 2002-2004 annual average levels. And the paragraph 3.2 stipulates that all catches of Pacific bluefin tuna less than 30 kilograms shall be reduced to 50% of the 0204 annual average levels. Any overage of the catch limit shall be deducted from the catch limit for the following year. And also paragraph 4 said the CCMs shall take every possible measures not to increase catches of Pacific bluefin tuna 30 kilograms or larger from the 0204 annual average levels. That is measures to be taken for the 30 kilogram and or larger Pacific bluefin tuna. The same level should be kept as a 0204 level. And paragraph 6 says that the CCMs shall intensify cooperation for effective implementation of the CCM, including juvenile catch reduction. So this is a cooperation. CCM should cooperate. That's a general provision. Paragraph 2 said that the Northern Committee shall consider the develop reference points and harvest control rules for the longer-term management of Pacific bluefin tuna at its meeting in 2015 and 2016. That is our proposal was to set the interim target or recovery program, but we also talking about more longer-term management of measures of Pacific bluefin tuna, and we have decided to start talking about such long-term management issues from the next year. These are the points of adopted draft CCM on Pacific bluefin tuna. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Endo. Now I'd like to open the floor to questions. We received questions from a member of the foreign press, but one question at a time, please. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and if you are appointed, please wait for a microphone and state your name and affiliation before asking your question. Okay, Mr. Kelly.
My name is Martin Kölling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. I have two short questions. First question is how much of the tuna, the bluefin tuna, for consumption in Japan is actually from the Pacific, and how much is from the Atlantic? And secondly, how big is the impact? How big is the impact of this quota reduction for the Japanese fishermen, actually?
First question was how much was consumed by the Japanese.
How much of the consumption here in Japan is basically covered by the Pacific? We are talking now about the Pacific bluefin tuna.
Yes.
There's also Atlantic resources, right? Mm-hmm. And I would like to know how much of the Japanese consumption, how big is the share of the Pacific bluefin tuna in Japan for consumption in Japan? So how much of the maguro sushi we are eating is basically from the Pacific? And how much is from the Atlantic and the Mediterranean
So
Sea?
you mean
The
share of the bluefin tuna,
Pacific
Pacific bluefin tuna,
in Japan.
in all the within
Japan.
all the tuna consumption?
In Japan, yes, exactly.
どれでしたっけ？確かね、そんなぐらいですよね。
今あれでしょ、パシフィックは1万
2万トンぐらいだと思います。
2万トンまでいってないんだよな。一番最近のやつね。
あ、10年になるん
僕はさ
ですね。
今一番最近のやつ1万2000トン。Yes. As far as the bluefin tuna is concerned, currently production level in the Atlantic area is say 12 to 15,000 metric ton, and in the Pacific bluefin tuna, most recent catch is 15,000 metric ton. And 80% of the total catch coming to Japanese market. So we are consuming 80%. And so you see, plus you see we have other type of bluefin tuna, that is southern bluefin tuna. It's a totally different species, but it's close to the bluefin tuna because lots of fat contents in the fish. So those Atlantic bluefin, Pacific bluefin, and southern bluefin, those three species are highly valued species in Japanese market. And almost 100% of the southern bluefin tuna is coming to Japan. And currently, SBT, southern bluefin tuna, catches what? 12 to 13,000, I believe. So in total, 40,000 metric ton is the total consumption of the Japanese bluefin tuna, so-called bluefin tuna. Okay.
But also it includes adult one, not only juvenile adult one.
Total. And
total.
In addition to that, of course, we have cheap type of tunas like big eye, yellowfin, and sometimes albacore. Those are the probably 6 to 7 times larger amount. In total, I think 400,000 would be the total consumption of the tuna as a whole. So you see, bluefin is just a small part of the total consumption of the Japanese tuna. So if you go to the rounding type of the sushi restaurant, usually you eat big eye or farmed bluefin, not wild one, I believe. So you see, that's the situation. But you see, as I said to you, you see, so much supply sources exist. So you see, just 50% of juvenile Pacific bluefin tuna doesn't constitute big share of the consumption. That's why we explained to the Japanese media the negative impact by the reduction of juvenile catch by this particular management measure would be relatively small.
And also, you asked about the impact to the Japanese. Yes, of course, we have a very big impact to the fishermen, Japanese fishermen. We have, but the Fisheries Agency of Japan have decided to reduce 50% of 50% of Pacific bluefin, juvenile Pacific bluefin tuna compared to 0204 level. In March, and we have dispatched our officials to the various parts of Japan to explain how important of this issue and seek understanding. So we believe that, and also we had a big meeting gathering from the all over Japan on the Pacific bluefin tuna issues. On August 26th, national level meeting, and we have we also talk about the importance of this issues and seek understanding. And we believe that we had fishermen basically understood this importance.
And you see, generally we have two components in our fishery, Japanese fisheries. One is large-scale type of the past seiners. They are using the past seine net to catch small fish. And the other one is a coastal fishermen. They are using the traditional type of the gear, just to see, throwing a line and catch a fish. Then to see that, but the latter component involves so many fishing boats. Over 20,000 boats are involved, dispatched all over Japan. And so, you see, we have those coastal, those many coastal fishermen plus tens of the past seine fishermen. And for the past seine fishermen, the reduction rate is almost 60%, right, from the traditional level? 56%. And for the coastal fishermen, 42% reduction from the traditional level of the catch of juvenile fish. So you see, we moderated the impact for the coastal fishermen, but you see, large-scale fishermen took the you see, more sacrifice. Yes.
じゃあ前の方。
John Boyd, IEEE Spectrum Magazine. First of all, could you please define what you mean by recruitment? I didn't catch that explanation. And also, it's one thing to make an agreement, but it's quite another thing to follow through with the agreement. How are you going to make sure that the agreement is going to be lived up to? Thank you.
Yes. First question is recruitment. Recruitment is a new juvenile fish which come into fishery resources as a fishery resource. Newcomer.
0-year-old. Yes. 0-year-old. The fish born in that year.
Zero.
Born in that year. That's a
0-year-old. 0 to 1 year old. Very small fish, which comes into other fishery resources, right?
I don't know. I exactly catch your question, but you see, how to implement this measure is that the question. And like I said, you see, we have several types of the fisheries. One is the large scale, the other one is coastal scale fisheries. And coastal scale fisheries involves various types of fisheries. But we first divide the quota for the juvenile fish, almost half and half. Then for the large type of fishing boats, they have the quota, divided quota in area and sometimes by vessel. And then we implement the quota for them. On the other hand, for the coastal fisheries, fishermen dispatch all around the Japanese coast. So we divided the Japanese water in 6 areas. Then we allocate the catch limit on the basis of the traditional catch level. Then we already introduced the licensing system for all the coastal fishermen involved. Then we require the reporting. Then we monitor the report. Then we will issue the warning at the certain level of the catch, say 75%, 80%.
The warning at 70%.
70%, 80%.
70, 80, and 90.
95. And then the total catch reaches 95%, we close the fishery. In that way. And for other countries, there are three major fishing states. And one is Korea. And Korea is catching over 1,000 metric tons of juvenile by percent, large-scale fishery only. And they also agreed to the measure this time. So their catch limit would be 700 metric tons or something, and they will control that catch limit. And the last one is Mexico. And Mexico is not a member to the Western Central Pacific Fishery Commission. So we have to have another commission's meeting, IATDC, Inter-American Tropical Tuna Commission's meeting in October. And we are proposing the same measure to that commission, and we strongly hope that commission will adopt that measure. Then Mexico will implement the same measure. But we already started a dialogue with Mexico, and we hope they will accept that measure. And in case of Mexico, they have only past-seine fishery. You see, they don't have any coastal type of fishery. They catch juvenile bluefin by past-seine, large-scale type of fishing. That's all.
Yes, please.
Yuka Hayashi for the Wall Street Journal. I have some additional questions related to the catch and consumption. You mentioned that 80% of the catch of bluefin tuna in the Pacific goes to Japan. How about in Europe? Does Japan also take 80% of Atlantic bluefin tuna? My second question is, you said that the total consumption in Japan is 40,000 tons. I assume that's per year. Does that include juvenile fish that's imported into Japan to be sold to fish farms, to be fattened, to be sold later? And if that's the case, what's the percentage of that type of sale among the 40,000 tons that you mentioned?
Of course, that figure includes a juvenile catch, yes. And I said 80% of the global bluefin tuna production. That means Atlantic and Pacific bluefin tuna, both. And I said, as for the Atlantic bluefin tuna, current production is, you see, between 12 to 15,000. And Pacific bluefin tuna, 15,000, right? Then southern bluefin tuna, probably we should add that, but almost 100% of the southern bluefin tuna come to the Japanese market. That's the additional bluefin tuna source. But as far as you see, so-called bluefin tuna is concerned, northern bluefin tuna is concerned, we consume 80%. And you see, we are farming the bluefin tuna in Japan too, and by use of the juvenile. And usually we, our fish farmers accept very small fish, like 800 gram to 2 kilo. And they keep that kind of small fish at least for 2 years, and usually 3 years, or more sometimes. Then total production of the farmed fish by Japanese farmer is 9,000 metric ton recently. And of course, almost all of them are consumed in Japan. Yes.
Yes, please.
Siegfried Dietl, freelancer from Germany. What about Taiwan, Vietnam, and China and Philippines? I think they're also great fishing nations. So, do they not catch much tuna?
among those nations, the only Taiwan catches significant amount of bluefin tuna, because the bluefin tuna is usually migrate in another northern part of Pacific. So Vietnam doesn't have access to the fishing ground, and they don't know how to fish bluefin tuna. And so you see almost no catch record of Vietnam or China either. China doesn't have any history of the bluefin tuna fishery, fortunately. So you see, only Taiwan has a history and a technique of to catch bluefin tuna, but their technique is not the net type of the fishery. They are using a long line with you see many hooks, and they catch only large fish, and that amount is not large. So currently, they are catching large fish, just over 400 metric ton.
Any other questions? Yes.
Dennis Normal of Science Magazine. Mr. Endo, I think you said that in devising this plan, the rebuilding, devising the target for rebuilding, you relied on advice from scientists? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Can you tell us who provided this advice?
This one?
I think so.
Yes. This is a figure of try to find out the relationship between SSB and the recruitment, but we don't find any relationship. Usually in some species, SSB if SSB increases, recruitment also increase. But in bluefin tuna is not a case we found. So at certain level of SSB would be necessary for. We thought at certain level of SSB would be necessary for the recovery of the stock, but we found that this level is appropriate level. At least we under this level we can find big recruitment, even under this level we can find a big recruitment. So we found that this SSB medium would be a interim target. So we thought this would be appropriate interim target. That's what I mentioned. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you rely on the fisheries agency's own scientists to come to these conclusions, or did you get advice from outside scientists?
Yeah, we have in Japan. There's fisheries research agencies, so, and we talked with scientists of that agencies, and
maybe let me supplement. You see, we use that kind of scientific information produced and discussed by ISC, International Scientific Committee for Tuna Species in the Pacific. So that is the kind of the independent international body to assess the fish status, stock status. And but you see, the target level is a kind of the issue. Not only scientists but also the managers should discuss, because you see, that is the question. I chaired this Northern Committee meeting, and there are big discussion on which level should be target, of course. And we have that kind of scientific information. But you see, for example, United States you see, proposed to set more ambitious level as a target. But you see, Japan, you see, requested to set that kind of level, achievable level, as an interim or as an initial target. So still, the target level is a question we have to solve in the future. That's why this decision includes that work should be done in next year and 2016. And, but of course, we have to rely on the scientific advice from ISC. Of course, national scientists are working in that organization, but that is a kind of the scientific, independent scientific body's advice, not only from Japan, but also from the United States and even NGO scientists.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, follow up.
Thank you. Just to be clear, could you explain what happens now? This is a draft agreement, right? What has to happen for this to be fully adopted or whatever comes next? What's the process this has to go through?
The commission meeting, annual commission meeting is held December every year. So this coming December, we will have the commission as a whole meeting. And at that meeting, this decision, this recommendation will be adopted. And without Northern Committee's recommendation, the Commission cannot decide. So you see, we believe, not believe, but we think this recommendation will be adopted automatically in the Commission. That was a practice in the past. So, but the only problem is eastern side. You see, we don't have any binding measure for Mexico now, and Mexico is the secondary largest fisher in the North Pacific. So we need a Mexican acceptance in the other side of the Commission.
Any other questions? You have some follow-up?
This is maybe a bit of a whimsical question, but have you considered trying to reduce demand, to reduce consumer demand for bluefin tuna by educating consumers about the dangerous state of the stocks? I think this that kind of education campaign has had an impact on reducing demand for shark fin soup in Hong Kong, and I think this has had some impact on the amount of shark fin that has been caught. I wonder if you've thought of taking that approach.
I think the biggest problem of the Japanese consuming behavior of bluefin tuna is, you see, eating fish at very early stage. Because you see, over 90% of the bluefin tuna was consumed below 3 years old. That means, you see, we are eating fish before they spawn. So that's a very, you see, wasteful way to use resources. So you see, that's why even last year, in a nationwide meeting of the fishermen and consumers and retailers, I requested them not to eat small fish, not to eat small bluefin. And at that time, I was a government officer, and it was unusual for the government officer to request that kind of thing, which should be eaten or fish shouldn't be eaten. That is a kind of the consumer's choice. But but you see, I dare to say that to the meeting participant, and that was carried in the Japanese media, and that was a very provocative comment by the Japanese government officer. But you see, that is true. We are eating too much young fish, and that behavior should be rectified in understanding. And now NGO like Greenpeace, WWF are working on to campaign that kind of the improvement of Japanese eating behavior of the bluefin tuna. And I hope that they are successful. And they are contacting with a big supermarket chain and fish sellers and so on, and request not to accept small bluefin tuna. So I hope that will prevail.
Do they taste better?
Totally different taste. Usually you go to sushi restaurant, you have a choice of toro, chutoro, akami, but you see young fish is mixture, pink, and light taste, and cheap. That's why supermarket tend to sell that fish to the Japanese consumer at a cheap price. That is a problem.
Yes, please.
Miyahara-san, I understand that a research unit has been spawning bluefin tuna on land in cages on land.
Yes.
What are the merits? What are the benefits of this compared to spawning, farming, I suppose is the right word, aquaculture, farming tuna in the sea, close to the land? What are the merits?
Yes, we constructed a big pond to keep the relatively large bluefin tuna on land, because we have Kinki University and our institute already established way to artificially create the fish for farming. You see, we succeeded in artificial hatching, but it was conducted in the sea water, and it is not so stable. So it's from year to year, the level of the artificial hatching differed very significantly. That's why we wanted to have a very controlled environment for the adult fish. Then we started to keep the adult fish in captivity since November last year, and very, very fortunately we succeeded in artificial hatching this May. And then as a result, we are obtaining lots of information. What is the appropriate water temperature for hatching, and what is the appropriate light level of the hatching, and so on. And so you see, we will have a lot of data for the future artificial type of the farming, because now currently the older tuna culture are relying on the wild fish supply, including Atlantic bluefin tuna hatching. That's why you see small fish is consumed by aquaculture too. So that is one of the problems. So you have to tackle that issue too. The experiment you mentioned, sir, is a kind of the way to improve our technology of the artificial aquaculture, probably very significantly. Thank you.
Any other questions? Since we have some more time, I'd like to accept questions from the embassy representatives, if you have any. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your remarkable and very informal presentation. My name is Saeed. I'm from the Embassy of Algeria. Thank you, Mr. Miyahara, for your continued support as well. I have a small question. So I remember that, as far as I remember, in the 4 years before, there was a kind of decrease of amount of bluefin tuna caught in the Atlantic, just for the same reason. And in the last year, there was kind of figures showed that the resources came back to their ordinary regular level. So to replace the decrease in the Pacific Ocean, are you thinking, for example, for increase of the bluefin tuna caught in the Atlantic in the next ICAT meeting, for example?
Yes. Not 4 years ago, but I think last 10 years or even more, we struggled to control the Atlantic bluefin fishery. And very, very fortunately, since 2010, we have control. And we cut the TAC to almost 40%. Then we introduced very strict control measures by use of the video camera in water and so on. Then finally, we are seeing a very quick recovery of that stock. And in November, we are going to have a meeting, ICAT meeting, International Commission on the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. We will have that meeting, and we expect substantial amount of increase of TSC for the Atlantic bluefin tuna as a result of the recovery of the stock. But the problem is how to allocate that increased portion among the various parties. It's a very big question. So, but anyway, production level will increase significantly in the Atlantic. So that is one of the reasons I say it's the reduction of the juvenile catch in Japan would not affect the total consumption of Japan, because you see there is a potential increase of other supply from Atlantic bluefin. Atlantic, yes.
Any other questions? If there is no questions, I'd like to close today's session now. Thank you very much, Endo-san and Miyahara-san. Thank you.